Hey, this is John from Alloy211. Today's video is not a firearms video. Although if you've watched many of my videos in the past, you've seen most of them firearms related or something of that nature, or repair related. This video is about the U.S. national debt. And I want to make this video because I think it's important for all U.S. citizens, and especially all United States taxpayers, to really understand where our debt stands today and where it has stood over the last 40 years or so. And the reason why this is because I don't think people pay enough attention to it, and it's really a gigantic problem and will be an even more gigantic problem for our children. So if you have kids who are growing up and you see what the debt is now and what it could potentially be, this is something you really need to pay attention to, a lot more than I think is addressed in the news regularly. So anyway, let's get started, and I'll just kind of run down where our debt has been and where it stands now. And this is a very simplified overview of this situation. It's more of a visualization, in which this video, each one of these pennies represents $100 billion. That's $100 billion for each one of these pennies. To give you a rough idea of that, Jeff Bezos is worth $169 billion, and Bill Gates is worth around $100 billion. So, you know, each one of these is a Bill Gates. Think of it that way, if you want to think of it in those terms. But one of the problems, I think, when you get to talking about the debt is you're talking about such a tremendous amount of money that it's hard for people to really visualize that sum of money. So I decided to use pennies here representing $100 billion, because otherwise, if I made them represent any less, I wouldn't have enough table space to do this video. So we'll start here, pardon me, in 1980. In 1980, the U.S. debt was $880 billion. So that's quite a bit less than, say, we look over here at 2018. But, I mean, there are different factors in there. Like I said, this is a very simplification of it, but that's where it stood in 1980. In 1980, the debt per citizen was $3,988. And the debt per taxpayer, because not all citizens are taxpayers, so there is a difference there. And not only that, but people really need to realize this is per every person when it's citizen, you know, including children and such, whereas the per taxpayer only covers taxpayers. So just to get that out of the way. Anyway, debt per taxpayer in 1980 was $11,175. So that's not too bad, I guess. It's not great, but it's not too bad. Moving on to 1990, which the U.S. debt at that point was $3 trillion, having roughly gained $200 trillion between 1980 and 1990 over a 10-year period, which is still not great, but you'll see it could be a lot worse. From 1990 to 2000, the debt went from $3 trillion to $5 trillion in 2000. And again, about the same increase, about $2 trillion over that 10-year period. And then we have from 2000 to 2008, where the U.S. debt doubled to $10 trillion, which made the debt per citizen $33,198, which is a lot of money. In 2008, that would be a good yearly income for a person. It'd still be a decent yearly income now, honestly. And the debt per taxpayer had risen to $93,480. Now that's 9 times almost the rate it was, well, a little less, 8 times what it was in 1980, just over an 18-year period. So that is, you know, a huge difference. I mean, it's a doubling of the debt from 2000, and there are a number of different factors that go into that, and I'm not really going to get into that in this video. We're just going to go over, like I said, a visualization, just a better understanding of where our debt stands. Not necessarily the causes or the solutions to this, if there are really that many workable solutions, but just more over where it stands. Not to say, I mean, you could factor in a lot of things, September 11th, economic downcline after that, wars that people, you know, feel maybe were unjust. Like I said, we're not getting into all that right now, and that's really not the point of this video. Maybe a video in the future we will have more points about that. In fact, I would say there's probably going to be more videos on this, but we'll see. Anyway, from 2008 to 2018, another 10-year period, the debt went from, and this is just ridiculous, $10 trillion to $21 trillion. $21 trillion. Now, if you remember, each one of these is a Bill Gates. Each one of these represents a Bill Gates. And in 2018, there are 210 of these Bill Gateses. So if you were to say tax Bill Gates all of his money, it would take 210 of him, which there are not 210 of him in the United States, taxing them all of it to get rid of this debt. And, you know, you also have to kind of question, where do we owe all this debt to? And as I said, we're really not getting into that in this video, but that's something to think about too, is where do you owe this debt to? A big factor in the accumulation of this debt as well is the interest paid on it. Just like you may have a mortgage or a car payment or some sort of a credit card, you have to pay interest on the debt that you owe on it. And the more that you owe, the more interest you'll pay. So that's another way that we got here. You know, and then I honestly, and like I said, I don't want to get too far into it, which I've said several times, but there are things that bother me with certain programs that the government subsidizes to a larger extent than what they should, such as green energy. And that's not to say that we shouldn't invest in cleaner energy sources. We should, and I think the market should drive that. But when the government is investing this with the auspice of we are saving the world for future generations, but yet we're selling the country into debt for future generations. You know, the debt per taxpayer in 2018 is $174,000. And the debt per citizen, $64,000. So that means as soon as you're born, you owe $64,000. All kind of, I mean, again, simplification. Or if you want to come to this country and you want to be a taxpayer in this country, well, price to come in the door, you're going to be saddled with $174,000 in debt. I mean, it's existential debt because you don't pay it directly, but the government that is made of the people and of the people's coffers is owing this much to people, to nations, to entities. And, you know, this really is something that should bother everyone because it is a very real threat to our country to be in this level of debt, regardless of what other countries are indebted as. You know, honestly, that doesn't concern me. I understand other countries are in debt as well, but I don't live in those countries. I live in the United States of America. So I find this very concerning, and I think it's a topic that we really need to address. I think too many people, even if they're aware of it, maybe don't really think about how destructive this could possibly be to anything that the United States want to engage in the future. When you're saddled with this much debt, eventually you can't afford to do essential things that you need to do, such as highway maintenance, national defense. Although, again, that's a topic that could be addressed because maybe we spend too much on national defense. Not really addressing that in this video, but it could be a solid point. We really just need to figure out ways to spend less as a country. Our government does. One, by eliminating fraud, eliminating duplicate programs. I mean, you'd be surprised at how many duplicate programs there are in the United States government. That you don't need both of them. You could just have one, and that would be effective enough, and you'd save, you know, so many millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars. And you'll have people say, "Oh, that's just a drop in the bucket of all of it," which that's true. It's a drop in the bucket, but every drop that goes into the bucket is a drop to fill it. And every drop you take out is a drop to empty it. So if you eliminate enough drops, eventually you're going to eliminate the bucket. Again, an oversimplification perhaps, but when I see Congress people talk about things like a gun buyback, oh, it'll only cost the government $15 billion at their estimate, his high estimate, which is just kind of ridiculous anyway. But for a U.S. politician to go, oh, it's only $15 billion. $15 billion is a lot of money. A lot of money. And you add that up 10 times, $15 billion, that's $150 billion. That's one and a half of these pennies, well, you can't really do a half, out of this pile, you know. You do a drop at a time, and eventually this will be reduced. Now maybe people feel that we need to have added revenue to our government, and maybe that's true too, and maybe it's something that needs to be addressed. But again, not the focus of this video. This video is again more just focusing on the visualization of it and to get you thinking about where we stand in debt now. And to think about, if you were born in the 80s, our debt fluctuated to this in the 90s. And if you're born in the 90s, it went from this to this in 2000. And if you're born in 2000, it went from this to this in 2008. And now in 2018, this is where we stand. So this is in a large portion of the people who will view this video's lifetime, I'm sure. And there are also people who maybe are older who lived through even more of this. So it's something we really need to think about and we really need to address far more than I think is covered generally in the news. You know, occasionally when a budget hearing comes up or something, this or that, they may address it a little bit. Or a politician here or a politician there will propose a certain law or a certain budgetary item, and maybe it'll make the news for a day. But then it'll get washed out by some, pointless kind of trash news or whatever. I don't want to say fake news because that's not what it is. A lot of it is factually based, but it's not really what's important. Things like this are what's important, and we're not even really discussing it regularly in the news. So that's my 2 cents. If you like the video, my 2 cents, actually it's quite a bit more than 2 cents, as you can see. Anyway, if you like the video, go ahead and hit the like button. If you watch some of my other videos and you find those interesting and enjoyable, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I really appreciate you watching, and if you have any comments you want to comment below. Thanks. Have a good day.